Please join in Dustin Dopirak with the Indy Star as he is traveling on the road covering the Pacers and their quest for a playoff series win over the Milwaukee Bucks. That did not go well last night, even though that the Pacers went 4-1 against the Bucks during the regular season. That was not the case last night. Damian Lillard, 35-point first half, and kind of put the Pacers on their heels to start things off, Dustin.
Yeah, no, I mean, the Pacers just look like, obviously they spent all year talking about, okay, we got to prepare for this. This is going to be different. This team hasn't been there in 4 years. There haven't been a whole bunch of guys who have been there. And they just came out and looked like, oh my God, it's the playoffs. What is this? And the atmosphere, Fiserv Forum was jumping, Damian Lillard, obviously, even without Giannis, that they didn't have Giannis available with the calf strain. And it just, but like Lillard going off, it just all seemed to like just knock them just clear back, like, whoa. And so when they missed their first 14 3-pointers, they came out with some defensive energy, but they just didn't seem to have, they just seemed to be a mess on offense. It just seemed to be just a little bit, you got the sense that they were just nervous, jittery, like all of the above. And I thought Lillard took advantage of their energy, and particularly the energy of Andrew Nembhard, who was playing his first playoffs. Nembhard was really up in him, and Lillard was like, "Okay, go ahead and try that. I'll get you to, I'll get you into stupid fouls because I'm a vet. I know how to take, I know how to take advantage of somebody playing me like you." So I think, it just was very clear that Milwaukee was the veteran team, was a team that had been there before. Most of their guys, obviously, they're a couple years removed from a championship. And Lillard has obviously gone pretty far in the playoffs himself, had some big-time moments there. So you could just sense that, like, Milwaukee had a slow heartbeat, and the Pacers did not at all. And so I think, obviously the big piece there is like, well, maybe they got out of their system. Second half was better. I think, you could obviously say that's probably because the Bucks probably took the foot off the pedal. But they could at least look at the second half and say, okay, we're here now. We understand it now. But the first half of yesterday, they clearly did not understand it. It just really, everything about playoff basketball hit them square in the face.
And that's a little surprising because we know that they're young, but they all have enough experience. But man, the Pacers were outshot behind the arc almost by Lillard by himself as he knocked down 6 3-pointers to Indiana's 8 in total for the game.
They were 8 of 39. So that's the issue. Obviously, it's one thing. We talk a lot about IU not taking a lot of them. The Pacers take a lot of them, and the Bucks were basically daring them to take 3-point shots. They really just were loading up against drives where you were seeing, you saw some driving angles where there's just a lot of bodies in there, and there's a guy wide open on the left wing. It's like, okay, we'll kick it over to him. It's an open shot. Like on many occasions, they made the smart move to put it in the hands of somebody that was wide open on the perimeter, and those shots didn't go down. And so it just seemed like everybody was a little bit too nervous to make a 3-point shot. And they ended up taking a bunch of them, and very few of them go in. They missed their first 14. They were 0 of 14 until about the 2:55 mark in the second half. And right at that moment, like right before they hit their first 3, Damian Lillard scored his 29th. It was 29-29 Damian Lillard versus the Pacers. He had as many as the Pacers did before the Pacers finally hit a 3, before Miles Turner got one. So that's the way it was. And I think that was such an obvious sign of their level of nervousness. They just could not hit a jump shot. And it just seemed like precision. It literally seemed like everybody just had like their palms were sweating and they could not hold a basketball normally. That's sort of what they look like throughout the course of the first half. And it just seemed like their level of nerves, their level of like, oh my God, we're finally here and it's a playoff series and this place is loud and they have Damian Lillard and oh my God, what do we do? And that's sort of how they looked throughout the first 24 minutes of that game.
Yeah, that was in essence the difference in the game for the most part. The Pacers only but 2 guys in double figures, which
3.
is kind of 3 rather. I missed TJ McConnell getting up to 10, but there's usually 4, 5, 6 guys in double figures, and by looking at that, you can see where they were able to limit the Pacers in certain areas.
Yeah, when they're at their absolute best, they've had games where they put 8 or 9 guys in double figures. I mean, that's when it's really, really clicking, when the transition game is there, and when they're moving the basketball and guys are hitting shots. I mean, they're capable of getting all those guys in double figures. I mean, I think they've got 9 guys that averaged at or close to double figures for the year. And so that's how they're supposed to operate. That's how they're supposed to function. Obviously, they have fewer guys available that can do that. Obviously, Benedict Mathurin being out and everything like that. But, again, you expect the playoffs to be different, but you don't expect this, just to not get that many guys going at all. I mean, Pascal Siakam his experience was very clear. He was the one guy who seemed to have a slow heartbeat out there because he's won a championship. This is not an atmosphere that he doesn't know what it's like. He came in was just himself, and they were really able to ride him and rely on him. And he had 36, and just everybody else was a bit of a mess. And Miles Turner had 17, but he was 5 of 17. TJ McConnell played reasonably well, but he was 5 of 13. And on the flip side of that, you had other guys. Tyrese Halliburton in particular doesn't take a lot of shots. He was 4 of 7 from the floor. And you kind of can't have that. I mean, you need him to be a little bit more aggressive, hunt his own shot a little bit. And he really didn't. I mean, I think a lot of cases he made the smart play, but it's a smart play if the shot goes in. And if the shot, it's a smart play if the shot goes in a reasonable amount. I mean, he was hitting the open guy, driving some, drawing some bodies, passing out, and when it, to a person who didn't make a wide open shot. And at a certain point, when they're not making wide open shots, it's like, well, that's not the smart play anymore. At some point you have to drive, you have to attack, you have to pull up, you have to hit floater, you have to go to the rim, something. You have to find a way to get your own shot as an all-star, as a guy that's up for all NBA consideration, as a guy that's, if he does make all NBA, is going to have a $260 million contract. You have to be the guy at some point. And so that was, I think, a notion of, all right, this is your first playoff game, and you have to know that it is on you to score the basketball a little bit. So there was just a lot out of sync across the board, for these guys.
And the fact that 2-time NBA MVP Giannis Antetokounmpo was sidelined with a calf strain and not even a part of that, that's got to strike a little fear into the heart of Pacers fans.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, I think you look at it and say, okay, well, I mean, I think you still look at the math and say you needed to get 1 up here. You needed to get 1 in Milwaukee. And so you have another one on the board. And so if they can go win game 2, home court advantage is still on their side. And so you also don't know, is Dame going to be able to do this all series? Because if Dame's like this, and Giannis comes back, then it's over. Then it's a wrap. But you don't know that Lillard is going to be like this the whole series. And yeah, to James's point, it was a wake up call one game. I mean, I think you look at it and say, well, they just had to be introduced to this, and that's the way Miles Turner pitched it. It was, now we've been slapped in the face. Now we know what it's all about. Now we understand it, and we've got that kind of freak out moment out of our system. We can move on and just play basketball now. And so that's what has to make them feel better. Like, all right, beat them 4 out of 5. Giannis played in all those games. Giannis played in all those games, and he averaged 42 and had a game. I mean, they beat him in a game where he scored 54. So it's possible, and Nembhard had good defensive games against Lillard before. I mean, Nesmith did. I mean, like they did a good job of keeping Lillard from going off before when Giannis was on the floor. So, it's possible that they can slow him down. It's possible that they can slow Giannis down. It's possible they can not slow Giannis down and still win the game. So, they see that there's still possibilities. They're not freaked out, but yeah, if Lillard is going to go off like this, if you're going to get this version of Dame and then you get Giannis, then that's a problem.
Brian says Carlisle's been trying to tell him. He called him out versus the Atlanta, and they didn't listen.
I mean, he calls them out all the time, but it's also
supposed to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's just you don't know. I mean, he said after the game that the first half was embarrassing. I mean, like I got a whole bunch of people in my timeline saying, "Well, like it's because of Rick's rotations," and there's something to be said for that. He probably did rely. He did rely on the bench too much at the end of the day. He gave those guys a few too many minutes, and he did operate it very much like a regular season game. There was, I think, some slight adjustments in terms of, those guys played a few, less minutes, but they're, going in similar shifts, basically. So Rick can own some of this too, obviously, and you had to think, all right, well, you got to find a way to shake them out of it. When you look out and see these guys are deers in headlights, you got to find a way to do something, and it didn't so much work. So, but yeah, I mean, like he saw a lot of this coming. I think another thing that he mentioned was, hey, it basically in pregame was, if a team has two superstars and you lose one of them, you just get a bigger dose of the other superstar, and it's not really that much of a bargain. And so, it was really seemed prophetic when Lillard was going off for 35 in the first half. And so it was like, oh yeah, that's what he means.
Yeah, and so, but the good thing is it's one game. It's on the road. The expectations are you don't have to win. You're not expected to win many road games in the playoffs. So if you, like you said, if you can get one out of there, boom, you're money ahead. Actually, you're playing with house money at that point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you look at it as you've got to find a way to pull off a road win if you're the lower seeded team, but you can't expect to win all of them. And so it's hard to imagine a team going in to a place like Milwaukee and winning both on the road to start the series. When you're dealing with a team, it's only a couple of years removed from a championship, and you're still dealing with a lot of veteran guys that have been there before that have rings from this place. Not obviously not everybody. There's a lot of guys that weren't there for that last title run in 2021, but several of the guys were. And again, a guy like Lillard's won big games before, hit series winning buzzer beaters. Like that's for all, like, obviously he hasn't gone that deep in the playoffs, but when you've come through in those kind of moments, and you have no reason to fear. And so I think it was one. I think he's got international gold medals. I think he's been on an Olympic team. I think he was on the 2020 Olympic team. So it's just that guy's not going to be afraid of anything, and so like you have to presume that you aren't going to come up here and win both. So you're looking to win one, and you still have an opportunity to do it. Yeah,
it's just how you lost. I think it's more about how they lost the game, and having a stinker of a game in the playoffs is not always that unusual.
Sure.
Usually you don't want it to be game one because you want to think that they're coming in ready to play. And when they don't, you look like, oh, well, they weren't ready to play or whatever the case. So,
yeah, no, I mean, like, obviously the narrative, like the Twitter narrative for the first half yesterday is they are buried, they are trash, they are this, they are that. And you're like, oh, okay. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they are, I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that they've got no chance to come in and change the narrative going forward. But, they can't duplicate what they did in the first half yesterday because, then it is a wrap. But, you can change that narrative. You can be a different team, like the way basketball works in the NBA in particular. I mean, you can come off and be a totally different group in game two than you were in game one. So, so I think they get that. I think they understand that. It's like, obviously, can they change it? Can they make it work? Tough deal, because I mean they are going against a tough veteran group. A bunch of guys that have been there before. That are not going to wilt. And someone else pointed this out to me today. I mean, like the Pacers were trying to pick to win this series, and so Milwaukee is motivated. I mean that is one thing that you definitely noted from this. They, like you imagine they could look at it, come in looking at the series like, oh man, like these guys might actually get us. But they came in looking like, oh, they're not getting us. No chance. And so, that is something you have to deal with, is you're not dealing with a stumbling Milwaukee team. These guys got right over the last week, even after they dropped, I think, 6 of their last 8 to end the season. I mean, they are motivated to play the Pacers. They were not happy with how this series went beforehand. They believe in themselves. They're used to this, and they dictated tempo and they dictated pace. And so you have to find a way to flip them off of their game, and that will not be easy.
Hello, everybody. Jim Coyle with Indiana Sports Beat Radio, and thank you for enjoying our content and videos. And make sure you hit that subscribe and notifications toggle so you don't miss out on anything, whether it's Indiana Hoosiers, the Boilers, the Colts, the Pacers, Indiana high school action, whatever is happening in sports. We're trying to bring it all to you, and make sure you don't miss out on a thing. Again, hit the subscribe button for us. Helps us out a ton. We appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much.